Hello again team, it's Jess or JashiiCorrin and welcome back for another video. Today we're looking at trackers, but more specifically, trackers that allow you to track and find patterns or trends between multiple things. I'm going to be calling these combo trackers or combined trackers, and they can offer you really helpful information to consider. So for instance, looking at how the completion of one habit might influence another, or how the extent of your sleep influences how productive you are. For those of us who are tracking health-related items and habits, it could be related to finding particular triggers, whether that be foods, medications, certain activities, etc. We aren't so much going to focus on how you could use a combo tracker in this video, but more so some ideas of different types of layouts you could use for a combo tracker. The first idea is essentially just a regular habit tracker, which in itself is kind of a combo tracker. By listing out the various habits that you're tracking along the top, it already allows you to see which ones happen at the same time as each other, versus which ones don't happen when another one doesn't happen. For instance, on the days that I complete my nighttime routine, am I more likely to get more sleep hours? On the days that I wake up with my alarm, am I more likely to have a nutritious breakfast? Of course, this comes down to what you're tracking, but you can get really useful information out of this. It's good to note that I also have a separate video on habit tracker styles, which is linked in the description box below, but the style we have here is a vertical habit tracker. On the left, I've got columns for some tracker items that can occur to varying extents, so mood, energy, pain, and focus. And then in the next two sections on the right, we have a space for either a bar or a line graph for each of water intake and sleep hours. Obviously, what I'm filling in for this tracker here isn't actually real data, so in theory you'd probably be more likely to find more of a trend tracking these things across a month rather than what I've done here. What can also be good to note for a tracker like this is that if you only want to compare two of the things you're tracking, you can always cover up the other sections with some paper so that you can more easily focus on the things you want to compare. Flipping over though, the next idea we have is to include a line or day or notes section in your tracker. This can be good for instances where you might want to include some explanatory notes for your tracker items, or why were they filled to the extent they were. You could use this space to write down any triggers for things, both positive and negative, or just some general summary notes about the day. You can see I've only drawn up 15 rows here, so this style would happen over 2 pages. Or you could make the space for each day smaller, so taking up only 1 row, to fit the entire month on 1 page. The next 2 ideas we have here are graph style trackers, so the multi-line tracker and the multi-bar tracker. On each of these, you have a scale running up the side that each of your tracker items can fit to, and then the days of the month or week along the other side. If you were looking to set this style up for a full month, people would typically set it up so that they turn their notebook to have the days of the month running down the longer side. For the purposes of this video though, I figured it would be good to show you what the weekly version looks like. On this, you'd have each of your tracked items represented with a different colour or maybe a different line or bar style. You'd then plot these in to the extent that they happened on any given day. Hopefully that makes sense, the visual probably also helps. And it's also good to note that the weekly style we have here can also be really helpful for noting weekly trends if you use it for just the one habit over multiple weeks. This is something that I did a little while back now for my steps tracker, so I could see how my step count is affected by which day of the week it is, or more so if I'm more likely to get more or less steps on any given day of the week. Combining the information that I got from that with the notes that I had on my 2 lines a day spread also allowed me to account for any outliers. So for instance, on one day where I didn't get very many steps at all, I could look to my 2 lines a day page to note that that was actually a day I was at home sick. It's also good to note that while I have the line and bar graph ideas here separate, you can also use them together. So having a tracker that has one thing tracked with a bar and the other thing tracked with a line. Flipping over though, the next idea we have is to track all the things you're tracking on separate trackers, but have them on a folded Dutch door like we have here. On this one I've done a couple of possible different keys at the top, so depending on whether you're tracking something along a scale, or maybe if you're tracking moods, or just habits in general. The nice part about this combo tracker is that it allows you to move the folded door so you can see different tracked items next to each other. Having them all be on their own separate trackers though means that it doesn't end up looking cluttered. If you consider the line graph that we had on the last page, if you're tracking too many things, that's going to get pretty unreadable pretty quickly. But for instance, you can see at the moment we have trackers 1 and 2 next to each other. We also have 3 that's not too far away, and we can fold the Dutch door like this to see trackers 1 and 4 next to each other, just for easier comparison. We can also do this the other way to see number 1 and number 6 together, and then fold it back over this way to see 1 and 5 not too far away from each other. Obviously some of these you won't be able to see next to each other. For instance, we've got track of 5 here and track of 4, which are on the front and back of the same page. The next idea I haven't drawn out, just as it's pretty similar to the Dutch door idea, but that's to have each of the items you're tracking and want to compare on separate pieces of paper that you can store in your journal. This allows you to put any of the trackers next to each other for comparison, unlike the Dutch door idea where there were some parts that you can't view together. You could store these in the back pocket of your journal and then stick them in once the month was over, or you could make a paper pocket as part of your monthly setup to store the separate trackers in. Our next idea is another style of graphical tracker, but this is a scatter graph. The difference between this and a line graph is that for a line graph you plot the points moving from left to right, or day to day, and then connect the points in sequential order. On a scatter graph, however, you don't connect the points, but you may want to draw in a line of best fit when the period of time you're tracking over comes to an end. Scatter graphs are really good for comparing two things that you're tracking to see the correlation between them, in particular two things that can be measured on a scale. For example, here I've got the number of sleep hours and a rating of a person's productivity out of 10. Each day you'd come in and place a marker that lines up with how many hours of sleep you got and the day's productivity rating. Then, come the end of the month, you'd be able to see if there was any trend between the two, whether that be a directly proportional relationship, so when one thing goes up, so does the other, or an inversely proportional relationship where when one thing goes up, the other thing goes down. You may also find some other interesting trends, like maybe it's directly proportional up to a point and then tapers out or even starts to decrease again. Obviously, this style doesn't so much look at the trends over time, but you could indicate that information by using different colors or symbols. It's also good to note that just because two things are correlated does not mean that one thing causes the other. Correlation does not equal causation. Question of the day for you though, what items do you track that have a direct correlation? One of mine that I know would be taking my morning medication and taking my multivitamin, because I typically do them at the same time. So if I take one, I end up taking the other. Hopefully you guys found these ideas helpful or at least interesting though, and as always team, thank you for watching. If you liked today's video, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe to my channel for more on planning, productivity, and personal development. Until next time, bye!